Amazon is gradually pulling back from its supply network in the United States, and the reason is not fierce competition or tighter regulations, but rather President Trump's heavy-handed tariff policies. Sky-high import duties have sent costs soaring, forcing Amazon Being, which holds nearly 40% of the American e-commerce market, to consider shifting operations to countries with lower overhead. This decision has exposed a flaw in Trump's strategy. Instead of attracting more jobs and capital into the U.S., it is driving companies away. According to data released by Bloomberg and several other reports, by 2025, large corporations will cut about 20% of their imports through the U.S. as a direct result of these policies. Amazon is not alone. Other e-commerce giants are making similar calculations. Experts forecast that by mid-2026, both eBay and Alibaba will scale back as much as 30% of their U.S.-based supply chains, further diminishing America's role in global trade. Back in April 2025, Trump made a seismic move, a blanket 10% tariff on all imports into the United States and punitive duties of up to 145% on goods from China, long regarded as the world's factory. Analysts quickly described this as nothing less than a full-scale economic war. The impact spread far beyond America, upending shipping routes, shattering corporate business plans, and injecting an unprecedented level of instability into global supply chains. This was no longer about tariffs. It had become an earthquake, shaking the foundations of world trade. The new tariffs placed Amazon in crisis mode, compelling the company, which commands nearly 40% of U.S. e-commerce, to scramble for survival. Within just 2 months, it launched a sweeping restructuring plan involving more than $13 billion U.S. worth of supply chain contracts in an effort to offset the surge in costs. The impact of tariffs is not confined to spreadsheets. It reaches directly into consumers' pockets with everyday goods such as smartphones, laptops, clothing, and household items all spiking in price. Reuters reported that electronics imports alone have risen by as much as 25%, largely due to the 145% tariff slapped on Chinese products. For Amazon, a brand built on affordability and fast delivery, the dilemma is stark. Either absorb massive losses or pass costs on to customers. Neither option is sustainable. To keep its business model intact, Amazon had to make a hard choice. Cut ties with suppliers hardest hit by tariffs and overhaul its entire global logistics strategy. This is no mere technical adjustment. It marks a profound shift in Amazon's operating model. A company renowned for cost optimization and supply chain efficiency can no longer rely on its traditional partners and roads. Instead, Amazon is pouring resources into new options. Renegotiating or canceling billions of dollars in contracts while forging fresh partnerships in markets less exposed to Washington's trade policies. It is a dramatic pivot that underscores how Amazon is struggling to adapt to a turbulent global trading reality. Bloomberg observes that Amazon's restructuring of billions of dollars in contracts is not an isolated case but rather a reflection of a broader trend among many multinational corporations struggling to adapt to the volatile trade environment in the United States. The scale of tariffs imposed by President Trump this time goes far beyond anything seen before. Back in 2018, when Washington set a 25% tariff on Chinese goods, companies still had room to maneuver, whether by adjusting retail prices or renegotiating with suppliers. But a 145% tariff is a different story altogether. This is not merely an increase in duties. It effectively makes importing from China nearly impossible for many businesses. Smaller firms with limited capital cannot hold out for long and face the risk of bankruptcy. Even giants like Amazon have been forced into a sweeping overhaul. Their restructuring of $13 billion U.S. in just 2 months underscores the devastating impact of these policies while also exposing the limits of protectionism when applied in practice. Trump's intent was to make imports less attractive and thereby give domestic manufacturing an edge. Yet the outcome has been the opposite. Instead of spurring American factories to ramp up production, The policy has pushed corporations to seek alternatives outside the U.S. According to analysis by the Wall Street Journal, U.S. imports fell by as much as 15% in the first half of 2025, largely because companies like Amazon redirected trade flows to avoid soaring costs. This is no longer just an operational adjustment by a few firms, but a signal of a broad shift away from the American market. The ripple effects are reshaping the entire global trade landscape. Shipping routes that once funneled goods through U.S. ports are being redrawn, especially the corridors connecting Asia to North America. The very arteries most severely disrupted by these tariffs. Amazon has just carried out a $13 billion overhaul, canceling a raft of supplier contracts and reallocating billions into new markets less affected by American trade policies. While this move preserves the company's profit margins, it raises pressing questions about the long-term stability of U.S. trade infrastructure. Ports, transport firms, and warehouse systems, all reliant on Amazon's steady flow of imports, are already reporting noticeable declines, particularly at major logistics hubs. The Trump administration remains steadfast in defending its tariff policies, framing them as tools to reinforce domestic economic strength. Treasury Secretary Scott Bant recently declared that these duties put pressure on foreign rivals and give the U.S. added leverage at the negotiating table. Economists, however, take a different view. A study by the Peterson Institute forecasts that American businesses will shoulder an additional $50 billion U.S. in costs annually. While evidence of new job creation in manufacturing is almost non-existent, in reality, Amazon's restructuring plan is not bringing work back to the United States. Quite the opposite. It highlights a trend of sidestepping the U.S. market in order to protect profits. Consumers, too, are unlikely to escape the fallout. While Amazon has not immediately raised prices, rising import costs will soon push them upward. Retail experts warn that by early 2026, electronics and clothing could climb by 10 to 20% if tariffs remain in place.